The 6-year-old girl asked why her mother never came back. Landon Pierce stood in the kitchen of their cramped apartment, holding a grilled cheese sandwich that was burning his fingers, trying to find words that wouldn't break what was left of his daughter's heart. He'd survived 2 years of this. The factory shifts, the lonely bedtime stories, the weight of being both parents at once, and he was so damn tired. But tonight would be different. Tonight, at a wedding he didn't want to attend. He would meet a woman who terrified entire boardrooms, and his carefully controlled life would fall apart in the best possible way. If you want to see how a single father's world collides with a CEO's lonely empire, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The invitation sat on Landon's kitchen counter for 3 weeks before he finally admitted he was going to that wedding. It wasn't the fancy cardstock or the gold lettering that bothered him. It was the inevitable questions from people who hadn't seen him since the divorce, the sympathetic head tilts, the carefully worded curiosity about whether he was seeing anyone, the assumption that his life had somehow stopped moving forward the day Michelle walked out. His daughter, Emma, was spending the weekend with his mother. The apartment felt too quiet without her constant chatter, without the sound of her toys scattered across the living room floor. Landon stood in front of his closet, staring at the single dress shirt he owned that didn't have a stain on the collar. He'd bought it for a job interview 4 years ago. It still fit, barely. The wedding was for Marcus Chen, his best friend since high school. Marcus had made it out of their hometown, built something impressive in the city, and was marrying someone equally impressive. Landon had received the invitation with genuine happiness for his friend, and absolutely no desire to actually show up and be reminded of how different their lives had become. But Marcus had called him 2 nights ago, voice rough with something that sounded like actual emotion, and said, "I need you there, man. You're the only person at this whole thing who knew me when I was nobody." So here Landon was, pulling into the parking lot of a venue that probably cost more than he made in 6 months, surrounded by cars that looked like they belonged in a luxury dealership rather than a wedding. The ceremony was outdoors, set against a backdrop of manicured gardens and a sunset that looked almost fake in its perfection. Landon found a seat in the back row, hoping to blend into the crowd of people who clearly belonged here more than he did. Everyone around him seemed to know each other, exchanging business cards even before the ceremony started, talking about mergers and acquisitions with the casual ease of people who thought about money differently than he did. The ceremony itself was beautiful in that expensive, carefully orchestrated way. Marcus looked genuinely happy, which was all that mattered. Landon felt his chest tighten watching his friend's face as his bride walked down the aisle. Not from jealousy exactly, but from the sharp reminder of what it felt like to believe in something that completely. He'd believed in his marriage once. He'd stood at an altar not nearly this nice and made promises he meant with his whole heart. Michelle had worn a simple dress because they couldn't afford anything fancy. They'd served sheet cake and cheap champagne at the reception in her parents' backyard. None of the decorations matched, but nobody cared because they were 24 and stupid in love and convinced that wanting something badly enough made it real. The reception was being held in a massive ballroom that somehow managed to feel both elegant and impersonal. Landon found his assigned seat at a table full of strangers who introduced themselves with job titles instead of names. He smiled politely, answered the basic questions about what he did for a living, and watched their interest visibly fade when he mentioned the factory. He made it through dinner by focusing on his plate and checking his phone periodically for texts from his mother about Emma. Everything was fine. Emma was asleep. He was free to relax, which somehow made it harder to actually do it. The speeches started after dessert. Marcus's brother told an embarrassing story from their childhood. The bride's father made a toast that was both heartfelt and slightly too long. Landon applauded at the right moments and tried not to calculate how much longer he needed to stay before leaving wouldn't seem rude. That's when he first noticed her. She was sitting 3 tables away, alone despite being surrounded by people trying to talk to her. She looked about 30, dressed in something dark and elegant that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her posture was perfect, her expression politely neutral, and there was something about the way she held herself that suggested she was professionally bored. Someone approached her table, a man in an expensive suit who gestured enthusiastically while talking. She listened with what appeared to be genuine attention, nodded at something he said, and then gave him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The man walked away looking pleased with himself, completely missing the fact that she'd dismissed him without saying a word. Landon watched this happen 3 more times over the next 20 minutes. Different people, same result. They approached her like she was important, talked at her rather than to her, and left satisfied while she remained exactly as alone as she'd been before. He recognized that particular kind of isolation. He'd been living in it for 2 years. The dancing started. Landon used the opportunity to slip outside, finding a side door that led to the gardens. The air was cooler out here, carrying the smell of roses and fresh-cut grass. He walked until he found a bench partially hidden by hedges, far enough from the building that the music became a distant murmur. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photo he'd taken of Emma that morning. She was holding up a rock she'd found in the parking lot, her face split with a gap-toothed grin, proud of her treasure. He'd added it to the collection she kept in a shoebox under her bed. Rocks, bottle caps, a fancy napkin from a restaurant they'd gone to for her birthday, a button that had fallen off his work shirt. She collected moments, his daughter, little physical pieces of days she wanted to remember. Escaping too? Landon looked up sharply. The woman from inside stood a few feet away, holding a glass of wine and wearing an expression that suggested she was genuinely asking rather than making small talk. "Just needed some air," he said. She nodded, glancing back toward the building. "I've been to 43 weddings in the last 5 years. They all start to blur together after a while." 43? Networking events disguised as celebrations. She took a sip of wine. "I'm expected to attend. Show my face, make an appearance, remind people I exist outside of boardrooms." There was something bitter in her tone that didn't match the expensive dress or the confident way she carried herself. "You know Marcus?" Landon asked. Landon. "We worked together briefly. He's brilliant, wasted in his current position, but brilliant." She looked at Landon directly for the first time, and he was surprised by how tired her eyes looked. "You're the friend from before, aren't you? He mentioned someone from high school was coming." Landon Pierce. He didn't stand up or offer his hand, and she seemed to appreciate that. Vivian Sterling. The name meant nothing to him, which apparently showed on his face because something shifted in her expression, a crack in whatever armor she'd been wearing. "You don't know who I am," she said. It wasn't a question. "Should I?" "Most people here do." She moved closer, sitting down on the opposite end of the bench without asking permission. "It's refreshing, actually. Everyone inside wants something from me. Investment advice, business connections. 5 minutes of my time they can leverage into a career opportunity." Sounds exhausting. It is. She stared at her wine glass, watching the liquid catch the light from the distant building. "What do you do, Landon Pierce?" "I work at a manufacturing plant, assembly line mostly. It's loud and repetitive and pays enough to keep the lights on." He waited for the polite disinterest, the subtle shift in her body language that would signal the end of this conversation. Instead, she looked at him with something that might have been curiosity. "Do you like it?" Nobody ever asked him that. They asked if it was hard work, if the hours were long, if he was looking for something better. But nobody asked if he actually liked it. "It's honest work," he said finally. "I show up, do my job, go home." There's something satisfying about that simplicity. Simplicity. She repeated the word like she was testing how it felt. "I can't remember the last time my life was simple." They sat in silence for a moment. The music from the reception changed to something slower, more romantic. Through the windows, Landon could see couples moving onto the dance floor. "You have to go back in there?" he asked. "Eventually, I'm supposed to dance with Marcus, congratulate the bride, be seen being happy for them." She set her wine glass down on the bench between them. "What about you?" "I'm staying long enough to not be rude, then going home to relieve my babysitter." "You have kids?" "A daughter, Emma. She's 6. Vivian's expression softened in a way that seemed involuntary, like she'd forgotten to maintain whatever mask she usually wore. "What's she like?" Landon pulled out his phone and showed her the photo of Emma with her rock. "She collects things. Anything she thinks is special or worth remembering. Drives me crazy because I keep finding weird stuff in her pockets when I do laundry, but I love that about her. She finds magic in everything." "That's a gift," Vivian said quietly. Most people lose that. Did you? She looked at him sharply, and for a second he thought he'd crossed some line. Then she laughed, and it sounded genuine and slightly bitter at the same time. I don't think I ever had it to lose. She picked up her wine glass again, turning it slowly in her hands. I was always focused on the next goal, the next achievement, the next milestone that would prove I was worth something. My father built a company from nothing. I was supposed to take it further, make it matter more. There wasn't time for collecting rocks or finding magic. Sounds lonely. It is. She met his eyes, and there was something raw in her gaze that made Landon's chest tighten. Do you know what it's like to be surrounded by hundreds of people and feel completely invisible? They see my title, my position, my net worth. They see what I can do for them, but nobody actually sees me. Landon thought about the last 2 years of his life, the well-meaning friends who asked about Emma but never asked how he was handling everything, the coworkers who assumed he had it all figured out because he showed up and did his job, the way he'd learned to answer, "How are you?" with "fine," because nobody actually wanted the real answer. Yeah, he said. I know exactly what that's like, Fitz. They stayed in the garden longer than either of them probably intended. The conversation drifted naturally from topic to topic. Books they'd read, places they'd never been, the specific kind of exhaustion that came from keeping yourself together for everyone else's sake. Vivian told him about the pressure of running a company she'd inherited at 26, about board members who questioned every decision because she was young and female, about the careful performance she had to maintain every single day just to be taken seriously. Landon told her about the divorce, about Michelle's slow withdrawal from their marriage over the course of 2 years before she finally admitted she couldn't do it anymore, about the guilt he felt every time Emma asked why her mother didn't visit more often. I tell her that her mom loves her but has a hard time showing it, Landon said, staring at his hands. I don't know if that's true, or if I'm just protecting Emma from something she'll figure out eventually anyway. You're giving her hope, Vivian said. That matters more than you think. Does it? Or am I just teaching her to make excuses for people who hurt her? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than it had been all night. My father never told me he was proud of me. Not once in 30 years. I kept achieving more, thinking maybe the next success would be enough. He died 2 years ago, and I still don't know if he thought I was worth anything beyond what I could do for his company. I'm sorry, and don't be. I'm just saying I understand the weight of trying to protect someone from a truth that might hurt them. But I think hope is better than certainty, even when the certainty might be kinder in the long run. A burst of laughter echoed from the building. Someone had opened one of the terrace doors, and the music spilled out into the garden, louder now. They're probably looking for you, Landon said. Almost certainly. Vivian stood, smoothing down her dress in a gesture that seemed automatic. The mask was sliding back into place, the vulnerable woman from the last hour disappearing behind the polished exterior. I should go make my appearance. Landon stood as well. It was nice talking to you. Vivian. She said it like she was correcting him, and he realized she was. Not Ms. Sterling, not the CEO, just Vivian. And yes, it was nice. Unexpectedly so. She started walking back toward the building, then paused and turned around. The napkin in your daughter's collection, which restaurant was it from? Landon blinked, surprised she remembered that detail. An Italian place downtown. We went for her birthday. It was too expensive, honestly, but she wanted to go somewhere fancy. She loved the napkins because they had this gold pattern on them. I caught her trying to fold one into her pocket, and the waiter saw and brought her a clean one in a little bag. She's kept it ever since. Something in Vivian's expression shifted, becoming softer and more unguarded than anything he'd seen from her all night. She sounds wonderful. She is. Vivian nodded once, then continued walking back to the reception. Landon watched her go, watched the way her posture changed as she got closer to the building, shoulders back, chin up, preparing to be whoever these people expected her to be. He should leave now. His mother had texted that Emma was still asleep, everything was fine, take his time. But he'd been gone long enough. He'd shown his face, supported Marcus, done his duty as a friend. There was no reason to stay. except he found himself walking back into the reception anyway. The room felt stuffed with people now, everyone slightly drunk and overly familiar with each other. Landon edged along the wall, trying to make his way to Marcus to say a proper goodbye. He found Marcus near the bar, tie loosened, face flushed with happiness and champagne. "There you are." Marcus pulled him into a hug that was slightly too enthusiastic. "I thought you left already." Just stepped outside for some air." "You okay? I know this isn't really your scene." Marcus's expression sobered slightly, the concern of someone who'd known him long enough to read between the lines. "I'm fine. Just wanted to say congratulations before I head out. Stay for one drink." "Come on, man, I barely got to talk to you all night." Shut. Landon let himself be pulled to the bar, let Marcus order him a whiskey he didn't really want, and listened to his friend talk about the honeymoon plans and the new house they'd bought, and how strange it felt to be married. "You ever think about trying again?" Marcus asked, his words slightly slurred. "Getting back out there, I mean." "Not really." Landon took a sip of whiskey, felt it burn down his throat. "I've got Emma. That's enough." "That's not a life. That's just survival." "Maybe that's all I've got right now." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he clapped Landon on the shoulder. "I'm glad you came. Means a lot to me. Wouldn't have missed it." That was mostly true. He was glad he'd come. Glad he'd seen Marcus this happy. Glad he'd had that conversation in the garden with a woman who understood the specific flavor of loneliness he'd been drowning in for 2 years. He finished his drink, said his goodbyes, and made his way toward the exit. The crowd had thickened, people dancing and laughing and celebrating in that loose, uninhibited way that came with open bars and beautiful venues. He was almost to the door when he saw her again. Vivian was standing near the edge of the dance floor, listening to an older man in a gray suit who was talking emphatically about something. She had that same politely interested expression he'd seen earlier, the one that meant she was performing attention while being somewhere else entirely. Their eyes met across the room. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe? Or just the acknowledgement of two people who'd accidentally told each other the truth and were now back to pretending everything was fine. She didn't smile. Neither did he, but she gave him a small nod, the kind that meant she saw him leaving, understood why, and maybe even wished she could do the same. Landon nodded back and walked out into the night. The drive home took 40 minutes, long enough for him to replay the entire conversation in the garden, analyzing it for meanings that probably weren't there. She was a CEO. He was a factory worker. They'd had one honest conversation at a wedding, which didn't mean anything beyond two lonely people finding each other in a crowd and deciding to be temporarily less alone. He picked Emma up from his mother's house just after midnight. She was dead asleep, still wearing her favorite pajamas with the rockets on them. He carried her to the car carefully, buckled her into her booster seat, and drove home through empty streets. Back in their apartment, he tucked her into bed and stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep. This was his life. This small, safe, predictable routine that revolved around making sure his daughter had everything she needed. It wasn't glamorous or exciting, but it was enough. It had to be enough. But as he got ready for bed himself, he kept thinking about Vivian Sterling and the way she'd looked at him when he showed her that photo of Emma, like she was seeing something precious that she'd forgotten could exist. He fell asleep thinking about the garden, about the sound of her voice when she admitted to being lonely, about the strange recognition he'd felt sitting next to someone who understood the weight of keeping yourself together when everything inside felt like it was falling apart. 2 weeks later, Landon was standing in the break room at work, staring at the coffee machine and trying to convince himself that the bitter sludge it produced was worth drinking, when his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "This is Vivian Sterling from Marcus's wedding. I hope it's okay that I asked him for your number. I was wondering if you'd like to get coffee sometime." Landon read the message 3 times, convinced he was misreading it somehow. But the words stayed the same, direct and slightly hesitant in a way that didn't match the confident woman he'd met in the garden. He should say no. This was clearly a bad idea for about a dozen different reasons, starting with the fact that they came from completely different worlds, and ending with the fact that he didn't have the energy to start something new when he was barely keeping his current life together. His finger hovered over the keyboard, ready to type out a polite decline. Instead, he wrote, "When?" Her response came almost immediately. "Tomorrow afternoon? There's a place downtown that's quiet. I get off work at 3. Perfect. I'll text you the address." Landon put his phone back in his pocket and poured himself a cup of terrible coffee, trying to ignore the way his heart was beating slightly faster than normal. This didn't mean anything. It was just coffee with someone who'd been unexpectedly easy to talk to. But as he walked back to his station on the factory floor, he caught himself smiling for the first time in longer than he could remember, and he couldn't quite convince himself that this was nothing. Emma was at her after-school program the next day, which meant Landon had the afternoon free. He went home after his shift, took a shower that was longer than strictly necessary, and changed into jeans that didn't have grease stains and a shirt that actually fit properly. The coffee shop Vivian had chosen was in a part of downtown he rarely visited, the kind of neighborhood where the buildings were old brick converted into expensive lofts, where the restaurants had menus without prices, and the people walking around looked like they'd stepped out of magazines. He found the coffee shop tucked between a boutique and an art gallery. It was small, genuinely quiet, with only a handful of tables occupied. Vivian was already there, sitting in a corner booth, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked casual but probably cost more than his car payment. She looked different without the armor of her professional clothes. Younger, maybe, or just less carefully constructed. "Hi," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hi." She smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Almost didn't." "Why did you?" Landon considered lying, giving her some polite answer that didn't reveal how much that conversation in the garden had stayed with him. Instead, he told her the truth. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about what you said, about being surrounded by people and still feeling invisible. I thought maybe you were the only other person who would understand what that feels like." "But qui est Jim?" Vivian's expression softened. "I haven't stopped thinking about it either. About what you said about your daughter collecting moments. About finding magic in ordinary things." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, not drinking from it, just holding it like she needed something to do. "I don't have that in my life. Everything is scheduled, strategic, carefully planned to achieve some larger goal. There's no room for magic. You could make room. Could I? I run a company with 300 employees. I have board meetings and investor calls and acquisitions to manage. My calendar is booked in 15-minute increments for the next 3 months. Where exactly do I fit in time to collect rocks and find wonder in parking lots?" There was frustration in her voice, but also genuine questioning, like she actually wanted him to answer. "You start small," Landon said. "You take 5 minutes in your day that aren't scheduled for anything, and you just exist in them. You notice something you've been too busy to see before. You let yourself feel something that isn't productive or strategic. That sounds impossible. It probably is at first, but Emma didn't start out collecting moments. She just picked up a rock one day because it was shiny, and I let her keep it. Then she found another one, and now she has a whole box of treasures that remind her that the world is full of things worth paying attention to." Vivian was quiet, studying him with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. "You're a good father, he." "I'm a tired father who's making it up as I go and hoping I don't mess her up too badly." That's probably what being a good father actually looks like. They talked for 2 hours, long enough that the barista started giving them pointed looks about taking up a table. Vivian told him about the company she ran, about the constant pressure to grow and expand and prove herself worthy of the empire her father had built. Landon told her about Emma's school play coming up, about how she was playing a tree and had been practicing standing very still for weeks. When they finally left, walking out into the late afternoon sunlight, there was an awkward moment where neither of them quite knew how to end this. "Can I see you again?" Vivian asked, her usual confidence wavering slightly. "Yeah," Landon said. "I'd like that." "When?" "I've got Emma this weekend, but next Tuesday?" "Tuesday works." Day. She pulled out her phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. His phone buzzed a moment later with a calendar invite, professionally formatted with date, time, and location. He laughed despite himself. "You just sent me a meeting request for coffee." Vivian looked embarrassed. "Force of habit. I can send a regular text instead." "No, it's fine. It's very you." "Is that a good thing?"
Yeah, he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. It is.
Their Tuesday coffee became a pattern that neither of them acknowledged out loud, but both of them protected fiercely in their schedules. Vivian would text him a meeting invite 3 days in advance, always for the same quiet coffee shop, always in the late afternoon when Landon's shift ended, and before Emma needed to be picked up from her after-school program. They talked about everything except what they were actually doing. Neither of them called it dating. Neither of them mentioned the fact that these conversations were starting to matter more than they probably should. The third week, Vivian showed up looking exhausted in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. Her hair was pulled back messily, and there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Bad week?" Landon asked as she sat down across from him. "The board is pushing for an acquisition I don't think is smart. They see short-term gains, I see long-term disaster, and nobody wants to hear that the CEO they barely trusted in the first place might be right." She rubbed her temples, a gesture that seemed unconscious. "I spent 6 hours in meetings today being professionally told I don't know what I'm doing. Do you know what you're doing?" "Yes. But knowing doesn't matter if I can't convince them to listen." Landon wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, thinking about how to phrase what he wanted to say without sounding like he was offering advice she didn't ask for. "Emma had a tantrum last week because I wouldn't let her wear her Halloween costume to school in February. She screamed at me that I never let her do anything fun and that I was the meanest dad in the world." Vivian looked confused by the sudden topic change. "Okay, I knew I was right. The school has a dress code. She would have been embarrassed halfway through the day. It was a battle not worth fighting. But she was so angry at me, so convinced that I was being unfair just to be cruel." He took a sip of coffee. "Sometimes being right doesn't feel like winning." "What did you do?" "I let her be angry. I told her I understood she was upset, that I was still saying no, and that she could be mad at me about it. She cried for 20 minutes, then came and sat in my lap and asked if we could have pancakes for dinner." That's not the same as a boardroom full of executives questioning my competence, isn't it? They're upset because you're not giving them what they want. You know you're right, but that doesn't make them stop being angry. Maybe the answer isn't to convince them you're right. Maybe it's to let them be upset and stand firm anyway." Vivian stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You just compared my board of directors to a 6-year-old having a tantrum. If the shoe fits..." She laughed, surprising both of them. It was the first genuine sound of amusement he'd heard from her all afternoon. That's either incredibly insulting to them or incredibly generous to Emma. Probably both. They fell into an easier rhythm after that, the tension in Vivian's shoulders gradually releasing as they talked about nothing important. She told him about the Thai restaurant near her office that she'd been going to for 5 years without ever trying anything except the same curry dish. He told her about Emma's growing rock collection and how he'd had to implement a one rock in, one rock out policy because they were running out of storage space. "Where do the rocks go when they get rotated out?" Vivian asked. "Back to nature, theoretically. Emma has a whole ceremony for it. She thanks the rock for being special, tells it about all the adventures it had in her collection. Then we go to the park and she finds the perfect spot to leave it, so another kid can find it and think it's special too." "That's really sweet." "It's also completely heartbreaking to watch, because she cries every single time, like she's losing a close friend. But she insists on doing it anyway because she says the rocks need to go have more adventures." Vivian's expression went soft in that way it did whenever he talked about Emma. "She sounds like an extraordinary kid. She's something, that's for sure." Landon checked his phone, saw that he had 15 minutes before he needed to leave to pick Emma up. "I should head out soon." "Right, of course." Vivian started gathering her things, that polished professional mask sliding back into place. "Same time next week?" "Actually, I can't do Tuesday. Emma's school play is that night." "The one where she's a tree?" He was surprised she remembered. "Yeah, she's been practicing her tree pose for weeks. I'm legally required to attend and take at least 40 photos." "That sounds nice." There was something wistful in Vivian's voice that made Landon pause. "You could come if you want. It's going to be chaotic, and the acoustics in the school gym are terrible, but Emma would probably get a kick out of having extra people in the audience." Vivian looked startled. You want me to come to your daughter's school play? Or yes, ish girl. Only if you want to. No pressure. I just thought. He stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence without making this into something bigger than it was. You said you wanted to see what finding magic in ordinary things looked like. Elementary school plays are pretty much the definition of ordinary magic. I have a dinner meeting that night. Okay, but I could probably move it. She said it quickly, like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. What time does it start? Is summit. 7. But you really don't have to. I want to. She met his eyes, and there was something vulnerable in her expression that made his chest tight. If that's okay. Yeah, Landon said. That's okay, Papa. He texted her the address of Emma's school that night, half expecting her to back out before the play actually happened. But Tuesday afternoon, she confirmed she was still coming, and Landon found himself unexpectedly nervous, in a way he hadn't been since his first date with Michelle a decade ago. Emma was vibrating with excitement when he picked her up from school. Is tonight the night? Is it finally tonight? It's finally tonight. And you're going to take pictures? So many pictures. And you're going to clap really loud even though I don't have any words to say? The loudest clapping you've ever heard. She bounced in her booster seat the entire drive home, narrating her whole day in breathless run-on sentences that barely paused for air. Landon listened with half his attention, while the other half wondered if he'd made a massive mistake inviting Vivian into this part of his life. They got to the school an hour early because Emma insisted on being there to help set up, which meant Landon spent 45 minutes watching his daughter and her classmates run around the gym in tree costumes while their teacher tried desperately to organize them into something resembling a coherent production. Parents started filtering in around 6:30, claiming the good seats and setting up cameras. Landon found a spot in the third row and saved an extra chair, trying not to check his phone every 30 seconds to see if Vivian had canceled. She showed up at 6:50, wearing jeans and a blazer that was probably her version of dressing casually. She looked out of place among the other parents in their sweatpants and exhausted expressions, but she smiled when she spotted him and made her way through the crowd. I wasn't sure I'd find you, she said, sitting down in the saved seat. Glad you made it. Me too, I think. This is all very new territory for me. The lights dimmed before Landon could respond, and the play began with the kind of enthusiastic chaos that only elementary schoolers could create. The story was something about a forest coming to life, with kids dressed as various trees and animals performing a loosely structured narrative that involved a lot of unnecessary narration and forgotten lines. Emma appeared in the third scene, standing perfectly still with her arms raised like branches. She held the pose for a full 2 minutes while other kids moved around her, and Landon felt absurdly proud of her commitment to the role. She's really good at being a tree, Vivian whispered. She's been practicing. I can tell. No. The play continued with varying levels of competence. One kid forgot his lines entirely and just stood frozen until the teacher prompted him from the wings. Another kid delivered her dialogue to the ceiling instead of the audience. A cardboard sun fell off its wire halfway through and had to be hastily repositioned. It was a disaster by any objective measure, but Landon watched Vivian's face and saw something shift in her expression. She was smiling, genuinely smiling, at the beautiful mess unfolding on stage. When Emma's scene ended, Landon clapped loudly enough that several parents turned to look at him. Vivian joined in, her applause just as enthusiastic, and somewhere in the chaos of the gym, Landon saw his daughter's face light up with pride. After the play ended and the kids came flooding out to find their parents, Emma spotted Landon immediately and ran over, still wearing her tree costume. Did you see me? Did you see how still I was? You were the best tree up there. I didn't move even when Tommy stepped on my foot during his squirrel dance. That's dedication to the craft. Emma finally noticed Vivian standing slightly behind Landon, and her expression shifted to curiosity. Who's that? What? This is my friend Vivian. She came to watch your play too. You came to see me be a tree? Emma asked, direct in the way only kids could be. I did, Vivian said, and Landon noticed she'd crouched down slightly to be more at Emma's eye level. You were excellent. Very realistic tree behavior. I practiced a lot. Trees have to be very patient because they can't move around like other things. That sounds like an important lesson. Briam. Dad says being patient is hard, but it makes the good stuff better when it happens. Vivian glanced at Landon, something warm in her expression. Your dad sounds smart. He is. He knows everything about everything, except he doesn't know how to braid hair, so I have to do ponytails for school. I can't braid hair either, Vivian admitted. So we have that in common. Emma studied Vivian with the intense scrutiny that kids used when deciding if someone was worth their trust. Do you like rocks? I've never really thought about rocks before. You should think about them. They're really interesting. I have 63 rocks in my collection at home. 62, Landon corrected. We rotated one out last week, remember? Oh yeah, I forgot about saying goodbye to the sparkly one. Emma's face fell slightly at the memory, then brightened again. But I found a new one yesterday that looks like it has stars inside it, so now I have 62 again. Other kids were starting to pile up behind Emma, everyone talking over each other in their excitement. The teacher was trying to wrangle them back toward the classroom to change out of costumes. I gotta go, Emma said. But it was nice meeting you, Vivian. So it was nice meeting you too, Emma. Landon watched his daughter run back to her classmates, tree costume flapping around her legs. When he turned back to Vivian, she had a strange expression on her face. What? He asked. She's wonderful, exactly like you described, but also completely her own person. That's Emma. No filter, no pretense, just exactly who she is all the time. That must be exhausting for you sometimes. Well, it is, but it's also kind of amazing, you know? She hasn't learned yet that she's supposed to hide parts of herself to make other people comfortable. She just exists out loud and assumes everyone will accept her exactly as she is. What a gift, Vivian said quietly. They waited for Emma to change back into her normal clothes, then walked out to the parking lot together. The night had turned cool, and Vivian wrapped her arms around herself against the wind. Thank you for inviting me, she said. That was special in a way I didn't expect. It was just a school play. No, it wasn't. It was your daughter doing something she loved, surrounded by people who loved her. That's not just anything. Emma came running out of the school then, rock in hand that she'd apparently found in the parking lot. She held it up to Landon triumphantly. Look, I told you this parking lot had good rocks. We have a one-in, one-out policy, Landon reminded her. I know. I'll pick which one to rotate out when we get home. She noticed Vivian standing nearby and made a decision that only 6-year-olds could make that quickly. Do you want to have ice cream with us? We always get ice cream after my plays. Landon caught Vivian's eye, trying to silently communicate that she didn't have to say yes, that Emma was just being friendly, that there was no pressure. I would love to get ice cream with you, Vivian said, and she sounded like she meant it. The ice cream place was small and locally owned, the kind where they made everything fresh and the line was always too long. Emma ordered her usual chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Landon got vanilla because he was boring like that, and Vivian spent 5 minutes reading the menu before finally choosing some combination involving caramel and sea salt. They sat at a small table by the window, Emma between them, swinging her legs and talking nonstop about the play, about school, about the rock she'd found, about everything and nothing all at once. Landon watched Vivian listen to his daughter with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions and laughing at Emma's jokes that weren't quite jokes but were delivered with such confidence that you couldn't help but smile. Do you have any kids? Emma asked suddenly, ice cream on her chin. No, Vivian said. I don't. Do you want kids? Emma, Landon warned gently. That's a personal question. It's okay, Vivian said. She was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. I don't know. I never really thought it was possible with the kind of life I have, but seeing you tonight made me wonder if maybe I was just making excuses because I was scared. Scared of what? Emma asked. Of not being good at it, of messing it up, of caring about someone that much and not knowing how to show them properly. Emma considered this seriously, as if she was much older than 6. My dad says it's okay to be scared of stuff as long as you try anyway. Like I was really scared to be a tree tonight because what if I moved by accident and ruined everything? But he said even if I messed up, it would still be okay because I tried. Your dad gives very good advice. I know. He's really smart about the important stuff. They finished their ice cream while Emma told Vivian about her rock collection in extensive detail, including the backstory of where each rock came from and why it was special. Vivian listened like it was the most fascinating thing she'd heard all week, which made something warm unfold in Landon's chest. When Emma started yawning between sentences, Landon knew it was time to head home. They walked back to the parking lot, Emma holding Landon's hand and chattering about how she couldn't wait to tell her friend about the new rock she found. "Thank you again for coming," Landon said to Vivian when they reached her car.
It meant a lot to both of us.
"I'm glad I came. Really glad." She hesitated, then added, "Can I see you again? Not just coffee, I mean. Something real, Lotterio."
This felt pretty real.
"You know what I mean?" He did know. They'd been dancing around this for weeks now, pretending their meetings were casual when they both knew something was building between them that couldn't be dismissed as just friendship. "Yeah," he said, "I'd like that. I'll text you." She got in her car and drove away, and Landon stood there for a moment watching her taillights disappear before Emma tugged on his hand.
"I like her,"
Emma announced.
"She's nice, and she listened to my whole rock story without getting bored." "She is nice," Landon agreed. "Are you going to marry her?" "What? No. Emma, we're just friends."
"You look at her the way Prince Charming looks at Cinderella in my book." "I do not." "You do too. It's the same look, all soft and happy." Landon unlocked the car and buckled Emma into her seat, trying to ignore the fact that his daughter had just called him out with the kind of brutal honesty only kids possessed. Over the next few weeks, the coffee meetings evolved into actual dates that neither of them explicitly called dates. Vivian would finish work early and meet Landon at the park, where he took Emma after school. They'd walk the trails while Emma ran ahead collecting rocks and important sticks. And Vivian would tell him about her day in language he didn't fully understand, but listened to anyway, because he liked the way her face changed when she talked about something she was passionate about. She started learning the rhythm of his life. The Tuesday night dinners at the diner Emma loved, the Saturday morning cartoons that were non-negotiable, the bedtime routine that involved 3 books and at least 2 glasses of water and an extensive negotiation about whether stuffed animals needed to be in the bed or on the shelf. Landon didn't invite her to these things at first. She just started showing up, fitting herself into the edges of his life like she'd been there all along. "I have a board meeting in 2 hours," Vivian said one Saturday morning, sitting on his couch, while Emma built an elaborate tower out of blocks on the floor. "I should probably go prepare." "Probably," Landon agreed from the kitchen where he was making pancakes that were slightly burned on one side because his stove had uneven heat. "But this is much nicer than reviewing financial projections." "Watching a 6-year-old build a block tower is nicer than reviewing financial projections." "Us, everything is nicer than reviewing financial projections." She paused. "But yes, this specifically is very nice." Emma's tower collapsed with a crash, and instead of getting upset, she laughed and started rebuilding it immediately. Vivian watched her with fascination, like she was observing some exotic creature whose behavior didn't make logical sense but was compelling anyway. "She doesn't get frustrated when things fall apart," Vivian observed. "She gets frustrated about plenty of things, but the block tower isn't one of them. She says falling down is part of the fun because it means she gets to build it again."
I wish I could think like that about acquisitions that fail. Do you rebuild them? Sometimes. Other times I cut my losses and move on. Maybe that's the same thing.
Knowing when to rebuild and when to start something new. Vivian looked at him with that expression she got sometimes, like he'd said something profound without realizing it. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make everything sound simple when it's actually incredibly complicated." "I'm not making it simple. I'm just pointing out that maybe it doesn't have to be as complicated as you're making it." She stood up, smoothing down her jeans in that automatic gesture that meant she was preparing to shift back into CEO mode. "I really do need to go." "Okay. But I'll see you Tuesday?" "Actually, I was thinking maybe you could come over for dinner instead." "Here, I mean, if you want." Vivian froze halfway to the door. "Dinner here? With Emma? Is that weird? Sorry, I shouldn't have." "No, it's not weird. I just wasn't expecting it." She looked uncertain in a way he'd never seen from her before. "You're sure?" "Emma asks about you constantly. She wants to show you her rock collection, and I'm pretty sure she's been saving up tree facts to tell you. It would make her whole week if you came over.
What about you? Would it make your week? Yeah, Landon said honestly. It would. Then I'll be here.
She showed up on Tuesday at 6 with a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Landon's weekly grocery budget, and a visible nervousness that made her seem younger than 30. Emma answered the door and immediately grabbed Vivian's hand, dragging her toward the bedroom to show off the famous rock collection before Vivian had even fully stepped inside. Landon followed them, leaning against the doorframe and watching Vivian sit cross-legged on the floor, while Emma pulled out each rock and explained its significance. Vivian listened to every single story with the same attention she probably gave to quarterly earnings reports, asking questions and admiring specimens that looked like any other rock to Landon, but were clearly treasures to his daughter. "This one is my favorite," Emma said, holding up a smooth gray stone. "I found it the day after my mom said she wasn't coming to my birthday party. I was really sad, and Dad took me to the park, and this rock was just sitting there like it was waiting for me. It made me feel better." Vivian's expression shifted into something soft and sad. "That's a very special rock." "It is. I'm never rotating this one out. It's a keeper forever." They eventually made it to dinner, which was spaghetti because that was one of the 3 meals Landon could make reliably without burning anything. Emma talked through the entire meal, barely pausing to eat, telling Vivian about school and her friends and the elaborate fantasy world she'd created involving her stuffed animals. Vivian engaged with all of it, like she had nothing else in the world she'd rather be doing, and Landon felt something shift in his chest watching her laugh at Emma's jokes, and seriously consider Emma's question about whether trees could feel lonely. After dinner, Emma convinced Vivian to play blocks with her, and they built an elaborate castle that Emma narrated an entire story around. Landon did the dishes and watched them through the kitchen doorway, saw the way Vivian's professional mask had completely disappeared, replaced by genuine joy at this utterly ordinary evening. When Emma's bedtime arrived, she hugged Vivian goodnight like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Will you come back?" Emma asked. "If your dad invites me, I'd love to." "He'll invite you. He makes that Prince Charming face every time he looks at you." "Emma," Landon said, mortified. "It's true. You do." Vivian was trying very hard not to laugh as Landon ushered his daughter toward her bedroom. He read her the required 3 books, brought her the required 2 glasses of water, and arranged her stuffed animals in the required configuration. By the time he came back out to the living room, he was bracing himself for the conversation about what his daughter had just said. But Vivian was standing by the window, looking out at the parking lot with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I should apologize for Emma," he started. "She doesn't have a filter, and sometimes she says things that..." "Don't apologize." Vivian turned to face him. "She's honest. It's refreshing." "Even when she's embarrassingly honest about things that aren't true?" "Is it not true?" Vivian asked quietly. "The way you look at me?" Landon felt his heart rate pick up. They'd been avoiding this conversation for weeks, both of them pretending they were just friends when it had stopped being just friendship somewhere around the 3rd coffee date. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I haven't thought about anyone this way in a really long time. It scares me." "It scares me too." She moved closer, her voice dropping. "I haven't let anyone close to me in years. I built this perfect wall around myself where everything was controlled and strategic and safe. And then you showed up in a garden at a wedding and talked to me like I was just a person instead of a position, and that wall started cracking." "Vivian, I don't know how to do this," she continued. "I don't know how to be someone's girlfriend or how to fit into a family or how to be anything other than the CEO everyone expects me to be. But I want to try. With you. If you'll let me." "Yes." Landon closed the distance between them, reaching up to cup her face gently. "I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up. I've got a kid and a factory job and a life that's nothing like yours. I can't take you to fancy restaurants or introduce you to important people or be anything other than exactly what I am. I don't want fancy restaurants or important people. I want this." She gestured around his small apartment with its mismatched furniture and Emma's toys scattered across the floor. "I want Tuesday night spaghetti and block towers, and someone who sees me instead of what I can do for them. I want you." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break if he wasn't gentle enough. She kissed him back with a desperation that suggested she'd been waiting for this just as long as he had. And for a moment, Everything else fell away. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "We're really doing this?" she asked. "I guess we are. It's going to be complicated. My schedule is insane, I travel constantly, and the board is going to have opinions about my personal life that they absolutely shouldn't have, but definitely will. My ex-wife is going to have questions I don't know how to answer. Emma is going to want you around more than you might be comfortable with, and my life is chaotic in ways you probably can't imagine. So we're both disasters waiting to happen?" "Pretty much." Vivian smiled, and it was the most unguarded expression he'd seen from her yet. "Good. I was worried this would be too easy." They stood there in his living room, holding each other like they'd just made a decision that would change everything, because they had. The careful distance they'd maintained was gone now, replaced by something real and terrifying and worth fighting for. "Stay," Landon said quietly, "just for a little while longer." So she did, curling up next to him on the couch that was too small for two people, talking about nothing and everything until the late hours of the night. And when she finally left, kissing him goodbye at the door like they had all the time in the world, Landon stood there for a long moment feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The first few weeks of actually being together felt like learning a new language, where neither of them had a dictionary. Vivian would text him at midnight because she forgot that normal people were asleep at that hour, and Landon would cancel plans because Emma got sick or had a school project due that he'd forgotten about until the night before. They fumbled through it, apologizing too much at first, then learning when apologies weren't necessary and when they absolutely were. Emma adapted faster than either of them expected. She started asking when Vivian was coming over again, saving drawings from school to show her, requesting that Vivian be included in their Saturday morning cartoon routine. Landon watched his daughter fall a little bit in love with this woman who showed up in designer jeans to sit on their worn carpet and listen to 6-year-old logic about why stuffed animals needed names that matched their personalities. "Does she live with us now?" Emma asked one morning while Landon was making breakfast. "No, sweetheart, she has her own place." "But she's here a lot." "She is." "Is she your girlfriend?" Landon flipped a pancake, buying himself a few seconds to figure out how to answer. "Yeah, she is." "Cool. Jessica at school has 2 moms. I think having a Vivian would be kind of like that, but different." Vivian and I just started dating. This isn't." He stopped, realizing he was having a conversation about commitment and future plans with a 6-year-old who was currently trying to put syrup on her pancakes before they were on her plate. "It's complicated." Grown-ups always say that when they mean they don't know what's happening either. She wasn't wrong. The reality of keeping their relationship quiet didn't fully hit until Vivian mentioned offhandedly that she'd declined a business dinner invitation because it conflicted with Emma's parent-teacher conference that Landon had told her about. "You didn't have to do that," Landon said. They were sitting in his car in the parking lot of Emma's school, waiting for their time slot. "I wanted to. You said these conferences make you nervous." They do, but you have a company to run. You can't just skip important meetings because I get anxious talking to my daughter's teacher. It wasn't that important. And even if it was, this matters more. Vivian, people are going to start asking questions about why you're missing meetings. Let them ask. You don't mean that. She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the school building. You're right. I don't. Or I do, but I'm terrified of what happens when people find out. My assistant already asked why I've been leaving the office early on Tuesdays. I told her I started therapy. You told her what? I panicked. It was the first thing I thought of that sounded legitimate. Vivian rubbed her temples. This is going to come out eventually. We both know that. And when it does, I don't know. The board will probably have opinions. There might be some policy about relationships that I'm technically violating even though you don't work for my company. HR will want documentation about conflicts of interest that don't actually exist. Sounds fun. It's going to be a nightmare. She reached over and took his hand. But I'm not ending this because I'm afraid of some board members and their outdated ideas about professional conduct. They're going to think I'm using you. Probably. They're going to think you're making bad decisions because you're thinking with your heart instead of your head. Almost certainly. This could hurt your career. I know. She squeezed his hand. I'm choosing to be here anyway. The parent-teacher conference went fine. Emma was doing well in school, making friends, excelling at art, and struggling slightly with math. The teacher mentioned that Emma talked about Vivian sometimes, referred to her as my dad's special friend, which made Vivian look simultaneously pleased and terrified. Afterward, they picked Emma up from the after-school program and went to the diner she loved, the one with the red vinyl booths and the waitress who knew their order by heart. Emma chattered about her day while systematically removing all the pickles from her burger and building them into a small tower on her plate.
Why do you order pickles if you're just going to take them off? Vivian asked, genuinely curious. Because pickle towers are fun to build. Duh. Obviously. How foolish of me to ask. Landon watched them interact, saw the easy affection that had developed between his daughter and this woman who'd admitted she knew nothing about kids but was trying anyway. Emma had started sitting closer to Vivian during their movie nights, had begun asking Vivian's opinion on important matters like which rocks were special enough to keep, had stopped questioning whether Vivian would be around and started assuming she would be. It was everything Landon had been afraid to want, which made the inevitable collapse feel like it was waiting just around the corner. The collapse started small, the way these things always did. Marcus called on a Thursday afternoon, his voice careful in that way that meant he was about to say something Landon wouldn't want to hear. I need to give you a heads up about something. That's never good. Someone at the office saw you and Vivian together, at that diner you go to. They mentioned it to a few people, and now there are questions. Landon felt his stomach drop. What kind of questions? The kind where people are trying to figure out if Vivian Sterling is actually dating a factory worker, or if there's some other explanation that makes more sense to them. I've been deflecting. But you should know it's becoming a thing people are talking about. Great. Has she said anything about going public with it? We've talked about it. She knows it's going to happen eventually. Eventually might be right now, man. These rumors have a way of getting away from you if you don't control the narrative. After Marcus hung up, Landon sat in his car outside the factory for 20 minutes, trying to figure out how to tell Vivian that their private relationship was about to become very public, whether they were ready or not. He called her that night after Emma was asleep, and she answered on the first ring, despite it being almost 11. What's wrong? She asked immediately. You never call this late. People know about us, or they're starting to figure it out. She was quiet for a long moment. How bad is it? Marcus says it's becoming office gossip. Someone saw us at the diner. Okay, that's not the end of the world. Gossip is manageable. Vivian, you're a CEO. I'm nobody. When this gets out, people are going to assume I'm with you for money or connections or whatever else they think I could possibly be getting from this. You're not nobody. To them, I am. And they're going to make your life hell trying to protect you from me. Let them try. Her voice had shifted into something harder, more determined. I'm not hiding you. I'm not pretending this isn't real because some executives think they know what's best for me. This could damage your reputation. My reputation was built on being cold and untouchable. Maybe it's time people saw that I'm actually human. You're willing to risk everything for this? For us? Yes. She said it without hesitation. Are you? Landon thought about Emma asking if Vivian lived with them now, about the way his daughter's face lit up when Vivian walked through the door, about the fact that for the first time in 2 years he felt like he was living instead of just surviving. Yeah, he said. I am. Then we faced this together, Shetz. The rumors intensified over the next week. Landon started noticing looks from co-workers, conversations that stopped when he walked into the break room, a general sense that people were talking about him without talking to him. Someone left a printed article about Vivian on his workstation with a note that just said, "Seriously?" He threw the article away without reading it. Emma's school pickup became tense because other parents had apparently heard something and were looking at him with curiosity mixed with judgment. Single dad was one thing. Single dad dating a CEO was something else entirely. Something that didn't fit into their understanding of how the world worked. Vivian was dealing with worse. She told him about the emergency board meeting that had been called, about the carefully worded concerns regarding her judgment and professionalism, about the suggestion that perhaps she was going through some kind of crisis that required intervention. They actually said that? Landon asked. They were sitting in his apartment, Emma asleep in her room, talking in low voices about a situation that was spiraling faster than either of them had anticipated. Not in those exact words, but the implication was clear. Successful CEO doesn't date factory workers unless something is wrong with her. Maybe they're right. Vivian looked at him sharply. Don't do that. Don't start believing their narrative. I'm just saying maybe they have a point. We're from completely different worlds. Maybe this doesn't make sense to anyone because it doesn't actually make sense. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to Emma. Does it make sense to you? I don't know anymore. I don't want to be the reason your career falls apart. You're not. They are. And I'm not letting them win. She stood up, pacing his small living room with an energy that suggested she was gearing up for a fight. I'm telling them, tomorrow. I'm going to HR. I'm documenting the relationship officially. And I'm making it clear that this is real and not some temporary lapse in judgment they can wait out. Vivian! I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending that my personal life is up for committee approval. I'm 30 years old. I've earned everything I have, and I refuse to apologize for falling in love with someone they don't think is appropriate. The word love hung in the air between them, surprising both of them. They hadn't said it yet, had been carefully dancing around it even though they both felt it. You love me? Landon asked quietly. Vivian stopped pacing, looking at him with an expression that was equal parts vulnerable and defiant. Yes, I love you. I love Emma. I love the life you've built and the way you make me feel like I'm more than just my job title. And I'm not giving that up because some board members think they know better. Landon stood up, crossing to where she stood. I love you too. Even though this is terrifying and probably a disaster waiting to happen, I love you. Then we face the disaster together. Together, he agreed. She went to HR the next morning and filed the appropriate documentation. She scheduled a meeting with the board and walked in with a prepared statement that was professional, firm, and made it absolutely clear that her relationship was not up for debate. It went about as well as expected, which is to say it went terribly. The board chair suggested she take a leave of absence to reassess her priorities. Another board member questioned whether she could be objective about company decisions if her judgment in personal matters was this questionable. Someone actually used the phrase reputation management, like her relationship was a PR problem that needed fixing. Vivian sat through all of it with the same calm professionalism she'd used to negotiate multi-million-dollar acquisitions, and when they were done talking, she told them she would not be taking a leave of absence. Her priorities were exactly where they needed to be, and her personal life was not subject to board approval. If you feel my performance as CEO has been compromised, then call for a vote of no confidence, she said. Otherwise, this conversation is over. Nobody called for a vote, but the damage was done. The news spread through the company within hours. By afternoon, it had leaked to industry publications. By evening, there were articles speculating about the CEO dating someone outside her social circle and what it meant for the company's stability. Landon read some of the articles and felt sick. They painted him as either a gold digger or a naive victim with no in-between. They questioned Vivian's competence, her judgment, her ability to lead. They turned their relationship into a scandal, when all it actually was two people trying to build something real. His phone started ringing with numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters probably, wanting his side of the story. He turned his phone off and focused on making dinner for Emma, who was blissfully unaware that her father's relationship had become corporate news. Vivian showed up at his door at 8, looking exhausted in a way that went beyond just physical tiredness. He let her in without a word, and she collapsed on his couch like all the fight had drained out of her at once. I'm so sorry, she said. I knew it would be bad, but I didn't think it would be this bad. It's not your fault. It is, though. I put us in this position. I should have been more careful. Should have controlled the narrative better. Should have what? Hidden me forever? Pretended I didn't exist? That's not a relationship, Vivian. I know. But now you're being dragged through the mud because of me. Emma appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Why are you guys sad? We're not sad, sweetheart, Landon said. Just tired. Vivian looked sad.
Emma walked over and climbed onto the couch next to Vivian, leaning against her with the casual affection of someone who'd decided this person was safe. Did something bad happen? Sort of, Vivian admitted. Some people at my work are upset because your dad and I are together. That's dumb. You guys make each other happy. I can tell.
You can? Yeah. Dad smiles more now. And you don't look so lonely when you're here. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, and she wrapped her arm around Emma. Thank you for saying that. It's true. Grown-ups are weird about stuff that doesn't matter. You should just ignore them. I wish it was that simple. It is that simple.
You just decide they're wrong, and then you keep doing what makes you happy. Landon watched his 6-year-old daughter accidentally give better advice than any adult had managed, and something loosened in his chest. Emma was right. It was simple, even if it wasn't easy. Come on, Em, he said gently. Back to bed. But I want to stay with Vivian. Vivian will still be here in the morning. Promise? Vivian looked at Landon, then back at Emma. I promise. After Emma was tucked back in, Landon returned to find Vivian still on the couch, staring at nothing.
She's right, you know, Vivian said. It should be that simple. But it's not. No, but maybe it could be. Maybe we just decide that they're wrong, and we keep doing what makes us happy.
And if they fire you?
Then I'll find something else. I've been CEO for 4 years. I don't need this job to know I'm competent. You're willing to walk away from everything you've built? I'm willing to walk away from people who think my personal life is their business. That's not the same thing.
Musette. Landon sat down next to her, taking her hand. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. People are going to say terrible things about both of us. Probably. Emma might hear things at school. Other parents are already looking at me weird. We'll handle it. She squeezed his hand. Together, remember? Together.
The next few weeks were brutal in ways that neither of them fully anticipated.
Coworkers who had been friendly to Landon suddenly kept their distance, like his relationship had made him untouchable. Someone started a rumor that he was only working at the factory to seem humble, that he was actually living off Vivian's money. Another rumor suggested that Vivian was having some kind of breakdown, and Landon was taking advantage of her vulnerability. None of it was true, but truth didn't seem to matter much in the face of a good story. Vivian faced her own version of hell at work. The board continued to question her decisions, looking for any sign that her judgment was compromised. Investors started asking pointed questions about leadership stability. A major client pulled their contract, citing concerns about the company's direction. She came home to Landon's apartment most nights, exhausted and frustrated but refusing to give up. They'd cook dinner together while Emma did homework at the kitchen table, and for those few hours, they could pretend that the outside world didn't exist. I got called into the principal's office today, Landon said one evening while they were washing dishes. What happened? Some kid told Emma that his mom said I was a loser who was trying to steal your money. Emma punched him. She what? Punched him right in the stomach, first time she's ever hit anyone. The principal wanted me to know that violence isn't tolerated, but I could tell she was trying not to laugh because Emma apparently told the kid that my money situation was none of his business and also that his mom should mind her own.
I don't know whether to be proud or horrified.
I went with both. Told Emma that defending people she loves is good, but punching is not the answer. She seemed to understand, but also made me promise that you weren't going to leave because people were being mean. Vivian set down the plate she was drying. What did you tell her?
I told her you weren't going anywhere. Was I right to say that? Yes. She turned to face him fully. I'm not going anywhere, no matter how bad this gets. Even if they force you out,
Even then, I've been thinking about it actually, what I would do if I left the company. There are other opportunities. Consulting, board positions, maybe starting something new. I don't have to stay somewhere I'm not wanted.
You've worked so hard to build that company.
I've worked hard to build a lot of things, but the only thing that actually matters right now is standing in this kitchen with you. She pulled him closer. I meant what I said. I love you. I love Emma. I love this life we're building, even though it's messy and complicated and everyone seems to have an opinion about it. I love you too. He kissed her forehead. But I hate that you're going through this because of me. Not because of you, because of them. There's a difference.
Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, still looking guilty about the punching incident. Are you guys fighting? No, sweetheart, just talking. About the mean people? Something like that.
I'm sorry I punched Tyler,
But he was saying bad stuff about you, and I got really mad. Vivian knelt down to Emma's level. I appreciate you defending your dad. That was very brave.
but your dad's right that hitting isn't the answer.
Then what is the answer? Honestly, I'm still figuring that out myself. Grown-ups don't know everything, do they? Not even close. That's kind of scary. Yeah, Vivian agreed. It really is.
The turning point came 3 weeks later, in the middle of a board meeting where the chair once again suggested that Vivian's relationship was becoming a liability the company couldn't afford. Perhaps it's time to consider whether your personal priorities align with the company's best interests, he said, his tone suggesting concern while his eyes showed satisfaction at finally having leverage. Vivian looked around the table at the faces of people she'd worked with for years, people who'd questioned her at every turn because she was young and female and had ideas that didn't match their traditional thinking. She'd fought so hard to earn their respect, had sacrificed so much to prove she deserved to be in this room. And in that moment, she realized she didn't want to be there anymore.
You're right, she said calmly. My personal priorities don't align with this company's best interests. Or more accurately, this company's best interests don't align with mine anymore. The room went very quiet. What are you saying, Mum? The chair asked.
I'm saying I'm done defending my personal life to people who see me as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be respected. I'm done sacrificing my happiness to maintain a professional image that requires me to be perfect and untouchable. I'm done with all of it.
Vivian, let's not be hasty. I'm not being hasty.
I'm being clear. I'll stay through the end of the quarter to ensure a smooth transition. After that, you can find a CEO who fits your narrow definition of appropriate. She stood up, gathered her materials, and walked out of the boardroom with her head high and her heart pounding. She made it to her office before the reality of what she'd just done hit her, and she had to sit down because her legs weren't quite steady anymore. Her assistant appeared in the doorway, looking shocked.
Is it true? Are you really leaving?
Yes, I am.
Because of the board?
Because of me. Because I finally figured out what actually matters. She called Landon from her office, her hand shaking slightly as she held the phone. Hey, he said, sounding surprised. Isn't it the middle of your workday? I just quit. Silence. Then,
you what?
I quit. Walked out of a board meeting and resigned. Effective end of quarter. Vivian, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. For me, not for them. I'm done living my life according to other people's expectations. I'm done pretending that a job title is more important than being happy.
Are you okay? Honestly, I feel terrified and relieved and like I might throw up, but also more okay than I've been in years. Come over tonight. We'll figure this out together. Together? She repeated, and the word felt like a promise. She spent the rest of the day handling the logistics of her resignation, meeting with HR, drafting transition plans, ignoring the shocked responses from executives who couldn't believe she was actually leaving. By the time she left the office that evening, the news had already leaked to the press. Her phone was full of messages from colleagues, competitors, reporters wanting statements. She ignored all of them and drove to Landon's apartment, where the porch light was on and she could see Emma's shadow moving past the window. This was what mattered. This small apartment with its mismatched furniture and the sound of a 6-year-old laughing. This man who saw her as more than her accomplishments. This life that was messy and uncertain and absolutely worth fighting for. She knocked on the door, and Emma answered, immediately throwing her arms around Vivian's waist. Dad said you had a big day at work. I did. A very big day. Are you sad? No, sweetheart. I'm not sad at all.
Landon appeared behind Emma, and the look on his face was complicated. Concern mixed with pride, mixed with love. He pulled her inside, wrapped his arms around her, and held her while Emma chattered about her day and the apartment smelled like something burning in the oven because he'd clearly forgotten about dinner while waiting for her to arrive. It was chaotic and imperfect, and nothing like the life she'd planned. It was absolutely perfect.
The burned dinner turned out to be chicken that had transformed into something resembling charcoal, so they ordered pizza instead and ate it sitting on the living room floor while Emma built an elaborate castle out of blocks and narrated the entire political drama happening between the stuffed animal kingdom. The giraffe is staging a coup, Emma explained seriously, because the Elephant King hasn't been listening to his advisors.
Sounds familiar, Vivian said, and Landon caught the edge in her voice that suggested she was still processing what she'd done earlier that day. After Emma went to bed, they sat on the couch in the quiet apartment, and Vivian finally let herself fall apart a little. Not dramatically, just small cracks in the armor she'd been wearing all day.
I built that company into something that mattered, she said quietly. 4 years of 16-hour days and constant battles and proving myself over and over, and I just walked away from it.
You can walk back if you want to. They'd probably take you back.
No, they wouldn't.
And even if they would, I don't want to go back.
She leaned her head on his shoulder.
But it's still strange, you know? My entire identity has been tied to that job for so long. I don't know who I am without it. You're Vivian, the woman who listens to 6-year-olds explain rock classifications like they're presenting a dissertation. The woman who shows up to elementary school, plays and eats burned chicken without complaining. The woman who's brave enough to walk away from something that's killing her, even when everyone says she shouldn't. That's not much of a resume. It's better than CEO. That's not much of a... She lifted her head to look at him. You really think that?
Boy.
I know that. Emma knows that. The only people who don't know that are the ones who were never going to see you as anything more than a title anyway. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing absent patterns on his knee. I'm terrified. I've never not had a plan before. I've never just jumped without knowing exactly where I'd land. Welcome to how the rest of us live. How do you stand it?
You just do. You wake up, you handle what's in front of you, and you trust that things will work themselves out eventually. And if they don't, then you figure out plan B or plan C.
Or you make it up as you go and hope for the best. She laughed, but it sounded shaky.
That's a terrible strategy. It's the only strategy I've got, and I'm doing okay.
You're doing better than okay. She kissed him softly. You're raising an incredible kid and somehow managing to make me believe that walking away from everything I've built isn't the stupidest decision I've ever made.
It's not stupid, it's brave.
There's a difference. The news of Vivian's resignation hit the business world hard. By morning, there were dozens of articles analyzing what it meant, speculating about why she'd left, wondering if the company could survive without her leadership. Most of them mentioned Landon, painting their relationship as either the romantic catalyst for her departure or the scandalous reason she'd been forced out, depending on which narrative the writer preferred. Landon read a few of the articles during his lunch break at work and felt the familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. He'd become a character in a story he never asked to be part of, reduced to the factory worker, or the boyfriend, or occasionally the single father, as if those were the only things worth knowing about him. His coworkers had mostly stopped talking to him directly, but he could feel their judgment in the way they looked at him, in the conversations that died when he entered the break room. Someone had taped a magazine article about Vivian to the vending machine with a note that said, "Aim high, Pierce." He threw the article away and tried to focus on his work, but it was hard to concentrate when his phone kept buzzing with messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters, mostly, wanting comments about Vivian's resignation. He'd blocked 6 different numbers by the end of his shift. Marcus called him on the drive home, voice careful in that way that meant bad news. "I'm getting questions at work too," Marcus said, "about you, about Vivian, about whether I knew this was going to happen."
"What are you telling them?" "That you're my friend and the rest is none of their business. But Landon, this is getting messy.
There are rumors that Vivian's planning to sue the company for discrimination, that you're the one who convinced her to quit, that the whole thing was some kind of power play gone wrong."
None of that's true. I know, but true doesn't matter when people want drama. Marcus paused. "Are you guys going to be okay?" "I don't know. I hope so. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing, both of you, standing up for what matters instead of what's easy. Doesn't feel like the right thing when everything's falling apart.
Give it time. Things have a way of settling into place eventually." Landon wasn't sure he believed that, but he appreciated Marcus trying,
Emma's school situation got worse before it got better. The principal called to inform him that several parents had expressed concerns about the media attention surrounding their family,
worried it would become a distraction for the other students. The principal assured him that Emma wasn't in any trouble, but the subtext was clear. They wished his personal life was less publicly complicated. "Am I causing problems at school?" Emma asked that night during dinner. She'd been quieter than usual, picking at her food instead of inhaling it the way she normally did. "What makes you ask that?" "Some kids were talking about you and Vivian, about how she quit her job because of us, and how we're famous now, but not the good kind of famous." Bull-c. Landon set down his fork, trying to figure out how to explain this to a 6-year-old. "Vivian quit her job because she wasn't happy there anymore. It had nothing to do with you."
But the kid said, "Kids repeat what their parents say, and their parents don't know what they're talking about. Vivian left because she wanted to, and because staying would have made her miserable. That's all." Are people mad at us? Some people are confused. They don't understand why Vivian would choose to be with us when she could be with someone they think is more important or successful or whatever. But that's their problem, not ours. Emma was quiet for a moment, pushing peas around her plate. "Do you think she's going to change her mind? About us, I mean." "No, sweetheart, I don't think that at all."
"How do you know?" "Because she keeps showing up. Even when things are hard, even when people are saying terrible things, she keeps coming back. That's how you know someone's not going to leave."
Mom didn't keep showing up. The words hit Landon like a punch to the chest. They didn't talk about Michelle much anymore. Emma had stopped asking about her mother months ago, had seemingly accepted that Michelle existed somewhere in the abstract, but not in their daily life. "Your mom's situation was different," Landon said carefully. "She was struggling with things that had nothing to do with how much she loved you. But she still left." "She did."
"And I'm sorry about that. I wish I could fix it, but I can't. I don't want Vivian to leave too." "She's not going to leave, I promise." Emma looked at him with those two wise eyes that kids got when they'd already learned that promises didn't always mean what they were supposed to mean. "You can't promise that. You don't know for sure." "You're right. I can't know for absolute sure. But I know Vivian, and I know she means it when she says she's not going anywhere."
"Okay," Emma said.
But she didn't sound convinced. Landon texted Vivian after Emma was asleep, telling her about the conversation and the fear in his daughter's voice when she asked if Vivian was going to leave. Vivian showed up 20 minutes later, still in sweatpants from whatever she'd been doing at home, looking determined. "Is she still awake?" Vivian asked. "Probably. She's supposed to be sleeping, but I heard her moving around a few minutes ago."
Vivian went straight to Emma's room and knocked softly on the door. "Em, can I come in?"
"You could." There was a pause, then a small, "Okay." Landon stood in the hallway, listening to Vivian sit down on the edge of Emma's bed. "Your dad told me you're worried I'm going to leave," Vivian said gently.
"Everybody leaves eventually."
"Not everybody. Your dad hasn't left." "That's different. He has to stay because he's my dad. He stays because he loves you. That's not the same as having to stay." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? I've spent most of my life being afraid that people only wanted me around because of what I could do for them. My job, my money, my connections. And then I met your dad, and he didn't want any of that. He just wanted to talk to me like I was a regular person. And then I met you, and you wanted to show me your rock collection and teach me about trees. And for the first time in my whole life, I felt like people wanted me around just because of me." "Really?" "Really. So I'm not leaving, Emma. Not because I have to stay, but because I want to. Because you and your dad are the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I'd be an idiot to walk away from that. What if people keep being mean? Then people keep being mean. But that doesn't change how I feel about you guys. Promise?" "I promise. And I know promises are scary because sometimes people break them. But I'm not going to break this one." There was a rustling sound, and Landon imagined Emma hugging Vivian the way she did when she was trying to squeeze all her feelings into a physical gesture. "Okay," Emma said. "I believe you." "Good. Now go to sleep. Your dad says you've been staying up late, and you're going to be grumpy tomorrow." "I'm never grumpy." "Sure you're not."
Vivian came out of Emma's room a few minutes later and found Landon still standing in the hallway, trying not to let her see that he was crying a little. "You okay?" she asked. "You're really good with her." "I meant what I said in there, about you two being the best thing that's ever happened to me. Even now, when everything's a mess and people are treating you like you've lost your mind? Especially now." She took his hand. "Come on, let's go figure out what we're doing with the rest of our lives." They sat up late into the night talking about possibilities. Vivian had been fielding offers all day, consulting positions, board seats, companies wanting her expertise. She'd turned them all down so far, not because they weren't good opportunities, but because she needed time to figure out what she actually wanted instead of what she was supposed to want. "I keep thinking about what Emma said," Vivian told him, "about finding magic in ordinary things. I've spent my entire adult life chasing these massive goals, thinking that if I could just achieve enough, I'd finally feel like I was worth something. But the only time I've actually felt that way is sitting on your couch watching your daughter build block towers. You can't build a career out of block towers. Why not? Not literally, obviously, but why can't I build something around that philosophy? Something that values people over profit, that focuses on creating actual meaning instead of just maximizing shareholder value." That sounds nice, but it also sounds like the kind of thing that's hard to make sustainable. Everything's hard. At least this would be hard in a way that matters. It's cool? Landon watched her eyes light up talking about possibilities, saw her transform from the exhausted woman who'd quit her job into someone who was actually excited about the future for the first time in years. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I'm with you. But even if I fail spectacularly, especially then. Failure makes for better stories anyway." Is that your philosophy on life? It's gotten me this far. The next few weeks were strange in ways Landon hadn't anticipated. Vivian was suddenly around all the time, no longer bound by the demanding schedule of a CEO. She started picking Emma up from school sometimes, sitting in the pickup line with the other parents who definitely had opinions about the former CEO, dating a factory worker but were too polite to say anything directly. She learned to cook, which was a disaster at first. She burned rice, overcooked pasta until it was mush, and once somehow managed to set off the smoke alarm making scrambled eggs. But she kept trying, and eventually she figured out a few basic meals that were actually edible. "This is humbling," she said one evening, staring at a chicken breast that was raw in the middle, despite following the recipe exactly. "I've negotiated million-dollar deals, but I can't figure out how to properly cook poultry." "Cooking is harder than business deals," Landon said, taking over the stove. "Business deals follow logic. Cooking is more like art with high stakes. Everything I've done in my life has been based on logic and strategy. This whole situation is neither logical nor strategic, and I have no idea what I'm doing." "You're doing fine. I burned rice, Landon. Rice is literally just water and heat and time. Children can make rice. Children have also not spent the last decade running a company. Give yourself a break." She tried to integrate into his life instead of pulling him into hers, which meant showing up at the factory one day with lunch for him and his coworkers. Most of them were too startled to be rude, accepting the sandwiches she'd bought from the deli down the street with awkward thank yous and confused expressions. "You didn't have to do that," Landon told her afterward. "I wanted them to see that I'm not some untouchable CEO who thinks she's better than everyone. I'm just a person who's dating you and wanted to do something nice. I'm not sure it worked." They looked terrified. "Give it time. Eventually, they'll realize I'm not that scary. You're a little scary, but only when necessary." Money became a strange point of tension that neither of them knew how to navigate. Vivian had saved aggressively over the years and had a severance package that meant she didn't need to worry about income for a while. Landon was living paycheck to paycheck, carefully budgeting every dollar to make sure Emma had what she needed. When Emma needed new shoes and Landon mentioned he was waiting until his next paycheck, Vivian offered to buy them without thinking. The look on his face made her immediately regret it. "I can provide for my daughter," said quietly. "I know you can. I wasn't trying to suggest you couldn't." "Then why offer?" "Because I have money sitting in my account not doing anything. And Emma needs shoes now, and I thought I was helping. It feels like charity."
It's not charity. It's me wanting to help the people I care about. They had their first real fight about it, voices getting louder than they meant to. Both of them stubborn about principles that mattered more than the actual shoes. Emma heard them arguing and came out of her room looking scared, and they immediately stopped, both of them apologizing to her and to each other. Money's weird, Emma observed afterward. It makes people mad even when there's enough of it. She wasn't wrong. They worked out a compromise eventually. Vivian wouldn't just buy things without asking, and Landon would try to accept help sometimes without feeling like it meant he was failing as a father. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, which seemed to be the theme of their entire relationship. The media attention slowly died down as other scandals took its place. Vivian's former company announced a new CEO, someone older and male and exactly what the board had probably wanted all along. There were a few articles analyzing Vivian's legacy, most of them grudgingly admitting she'd been competent while still questioning her decision to leave. Vivian read them with detached interest, like she was reading about someone else entirely. "Do you regret it?" Landon asked one night. "Leaving, I mean." "No, I regret that I didn't do it sooner." "Even with everything that's happened since?" Especially because of everything that's happened since. "I'm happy, Landon. Actually, genuinely happy in a way I don't think I've ever been before. That's worth more than any job title." She'd started consulting on the side, working with smaller companies that were trying to scale sustainably without destroying themselves in the process. It was part-time work that she could do from home, and it gave her the flexibility to be present in ways she'd never been able to before. She went to Emma's school conferences and field trips. She learned the names of Emma's friends and their parents. She figured out the difference between playground politics and actual problems that needed adult intervention. She became part of the fabric of their lives instead of someone who visited when her schedule allowed. Michelle showed up unexpectedly one afternoon, appearing at Landon's door with an expression that suggested she'd been working up the courage for this conversation for a while. "Can we talk?" she asked. Landon stepped outside, closing the door behind him so Emma wouldn't hear this conversation. They hadn't seen each other in months, communicating only through brief texts about logistics when Michelle bothered to check in at all. "What's going on?" he asked. "I've been seeing the articles. About you and that CEO. Her name is Vivian." "Right, Vivian." Michelle looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to make sure this was real, that you're not doing something stupid because you're lonely." Landon felt anger flash hot in his chest. You don't get to show up after months of barely acknowledging your daughter exists and question my relationship choices. "I'm not questioning. I'm concerned." "About what exactly?" About Emma. About what happens if this doesn't work out. About whether you've thought this through, or if you're just caught up in something because it feels good right now." "I've thought it through, and even if I hadn't, it's none of your business anymore. You made your choice when you walked away." "I didn't walk away from Emma." "You did, though. You visit once every few months when it's convenient, you forget her birthday, you cancel plans at the last minute. That's not being a parent. That's being an occasional guest." Miss Michelle's face flushed. "I'm doing the best I can." "So am I. And part of that means building a life that includes people who actually show up." Vivian shows up. She's here for school plays and bedtime stories and all the ordinary, boring stuff that you decided was too hard. "I never said it was too hard. You didn't have to say it. You just left." They stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment, years of resentment and hurt hanging between them. "I'm not trying to fight with you," Michelle said finally. "I just wanted to make sure you knew what you were doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm being happy for the first time in years. I'm letting someone love me and Emma without making excuses for why it won't work. I'm building something real." "Okay." Michelle nodded slowly. "Okay. I hope it works out." She left without asking to see Emma, which was probably for the best. Landon went back inside to find Vivian in the kitchen with Emma, both of them making cookies that were definitely going to turn out lopsided and slightly burned, but would taste good anyway. "Was that your ex?" Vivian asked quietly while Emma was washing her hands. "Yeah." "What did she want?" "To make sure I wasn't making a mistake with you." "And what did you tell her?" "That I knew exactly what I was doing." Vivian smiled, soft and genuine. "Do you?" "Most of the time, no.
but I'm doing it anyway, which feels like progress. That's basically the human condition in a nutshell. Bet.
Emma ran back over, demanding that Vivian help her use the cookie cutters because she wasn't strong enough to press them all the way through the dough. Landon watched them work together, saw the easy affection between them, and felt the last piece of doubt about this relationship dissolve. This was real. This was worth fighting for. This was exactly where he was supposed to be. The cookies turned out terrible, too crispy on the edges and too soft in the middle, but they ate them anyway while watching one of Emma's favorite movies. Emma fell asleep halfway through, curled up between them on the couch, and Landon carefully carried her to bed while Vivian cleaned up the cookie mess in the kitchen. "I've been thinking," Vivian said when he came back, "about what I want to do next. Really do. Not just what sounds good in theory. And I want to start something that helps small businesses scale sustainably. Not the flashy tech startups that get all the attention, but the local shops and family businesses that are barely surviving because they don't have access to the kind of resources and expertise that bigger companies do." "That sounds perfect for you." "It won't make me rich. I'll probably struggle to get funding because investors don't see the immediate return potential. It's going to be hard. Everything worthwhile is hard." "You sound like Emma. She's got life figured out better than most adults." Vivian laughed, coming to sit next to him on the couch. "I never thought I'd be here, sitting in a small apartment, eating burned cookies and planning a business that will probably fail and being completely happy about all of it. Funny how life works out. Is it working out? Or are we just too stubborn to admit when we should quit?" "Both, probably. But I'm okay with that." Me too." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Me too." They sat there in the quiet apartment, the sounds of the city barely filtering through the windows, and Landon felt something settle in his chest that he couldn't quite name. Not happiness, exactly, because that felt too simple. Not contentment, because there was still too much uncertainty ahead. Maybe it was just peace, the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. And for now, that was enough. The business Vivian built didn't explode into overnight success the way her previous company had. It grew slowly, one small client at a time, each one a family-owned restaurant or a local bookstore or a bakery that had been struggling to compete with chains. She worked from Landon's apartment most days, laptop open at the kitchen table while Emma did homework beside her, asking questions about what Vivian was doing and why helping small businesses mattered. "Because big companies have lots of people to help them," Vivian explained one afternoon. "But small businesses are usually just one or two people trying to do everything themselves. They need someone in their corner." "Like how Dad has you in his corner?" Emma asked. "Exactly like that." 6 months after Vivian quit, Landon came home from work to find her sitting on the floor of his living room surrounded by papers, looking frustrated and tired and somehow more alive than she'd ever looked in a business suit. "Bad day?" he asked. "One of my clients is about to lose their lease because the landlord wants to triple the rent. I've been trying to figure out how to restructure their finances to make it work, but the numbers just don't add up. Can they move locations? Not without losing their entire customer base. They're a neighborhood institution. People come there because it's been in the same spot for 20 years. So what are you going to do?" "I have no idea." Which is terrifying and also kind of exhilarating because it means I actually care whether this works or not. At my old job, if a deal fell through, I'd just move on to the next one. But this matters. This is someone's whole life. Landon sat down on the floor next to her, looking at the spreadsheets that meant nothing to him. "You'll figure it out. You always do." "What if I don't? What if I'm not actually good at this and I've just been lucky so far?" "Then you'll fail and learn something and try again. That's how this works, right?" She leaned against him, exhausted. "When did you become the wise one?" "I've always been wise. You were just too busy being a CEO to notice." She laughed despite herself, and they stayed there on the floor until Emma demanded dinner and they had to figure out what to make with the random ingredients left in the refrigerator. Emma turned 7 that fall, and they threw her a birthday party at the park with a dozen of her school friends and their parents who still weren't quite sure what to make of Landon's relationship with the former CEO, but were polite enough to bring presents and make small talk. Vivian had spent 2 weeks planning the party with Emma, letting her make all the decisions about themes and games and whether the cake should be chocolate or vanilla. They'd settled on a rock and mineral theme, which was simultaneously the most Emma thing possible and completely baffling to the other parents. She wants a party about rocks? One mother asked Landon while watching Emma excitedly explain the difference between igneous and sedimentary formations to her friends.
She's very passionate about geology. That's certainly unique. Landon watched Vivian help Emma set up a rock painting station,
Both of them wearing matching aprons that Emma had insisted they buy. Vivian was laughing at something Emma said, completely unself-conscious in a way she never would have been a year ago.
"That's your girlfriend, right?"
The mother asked. "The one who used to run that big company?" "That's her, Bob.
She seems really different from what I expected. More normal, I guess."
She was always normal. People just didn't see it. The party was chaotic and loud and exactly what Emma wanted. Kids ran around with painted rocks, someone spilled juice on the picnic table, and the piñata broke on the first hit, sending candy everywhere and causing a minor stampede. It was perfect in its imperfection. When the other parents had picked up their kids and it was just the three of them cleaning up the park, Emma hugged Vivian tightly. "This was the best birthday ever," she said. "I'm glad you had fun. Will you be here for my next birthday too? If you'll have me, absolutely. Forever birthdays?" Vivian glanced at Landon over Emma's head, and he saw the question in her eyes. They'd been dancing around the forever question for months now, both of them knowing where this was heading, but neither quite ready to say it out loud. "Forever birthdays?" Vivian confirmed, and the weight of that promise settled between all three of them. The holidays were complicated. Michelle called on Thanksgiving to say she wanted to spend Christmas with Emma this year, the first time she'd expressed interest in actually being a parent in over a year. "She can come stay with me for a few days," Michelle said. "I've got a new apartment with an extra room and everything." Landon felt Emma listening from the hallway, probably catching enough of the conversation to understand what was being discussed. "Let me talk to Emma about it," he said carefully. "She's my daughter too. I shouldn't have to ask permission to see her." "You're right. But you also can't just show up once a year and expect her to drop everything. She has a life here, routines, people who depend on her being around. People like your CEO girlfriend, people like her friends, and her school. And yes, Vivian, who's been more present in Emma's life in the last year than you've been in the last two. But Sharas Jambopus." The silence on the other end of the line was sharp enough to cut. "I'm trying," Michelle said finally, her voice small. "I know I messed up. I know I wasn't there when I should have been. But I'm trying to do better now." Well, Landon felt the familiar war between wanting to protect his daughter and wanting to give her mother a chance to actually be a mother. "I'll talk to Emma. If she wants to visit you for a few days, we'll make it work. But Michelle, if you commit to this, you have to follow through. You can't promise her Christmas and then cancel at the last minute because something came up." "I won't cancel. I promise." He hung up and found Emma sitting on the bottom step of the stairs, face unreadable. "You heard that?" he asked.
"Most of it. Does Mom really want me to visit?" "She says she does." "Do I have to go?" "No, sweetheart. You never have to do anything that makes you uncomfortable.
But if you want to give her a chance, I'll support that." Emma was quiet for a long time, picking at a loose thread on her sock. "What if I go and she's different? What if she actually wants to be my mom now?"
"Then that would be a good thing, wouldn't it?"
"But what about you and Vivian? Would things change?" Landon sat down on the step next to her, trying to find the right words. "Nothing about how much I love you or how much Vivian cares about you would change. Your mom being in your life more doesn't mean less room for anyone else. Love doesn't work like that."
"Are you sure?"
"I'm sure." Emma visited Michelle for 3 days over Christmas, and Landon spent the entire time fighting the urge to text and check in every hour. Vivian stayed with him, keeping him distracted with terrible holiday movies and cookies that they actually managed not to burn this time. "She's fine," Vivian said for the 10th time. "Michelle may not be the world's best mother, but she's not going to let anything happen to Emma." "I know. It's just weird. First Christmas without her. You could call. She'd know I was checking up on her. I don't want her to think I don't trust her with her own mother." "You don't trust her with her own mother." "I trust Emma. If something was wrong, she'd tell me." Emma came home full of stories about decorating cookies and watching movies and staying up too late. She seemed happy, which was good, but also a little distant, which worried Landon more than he wanted to admit.
Did you have fun? He asked while unpacking her bag. Yeah, Mom's apartment is really nice. She has a TV in the bedroom and everything. That's great, sweetheart. She said maybe I could visit more often, like maybe once a month or something. How do you feel about that? Emma shrugged, a gesture she'd picked up recently that drove Landon crazy because it told him nothing. I don't know. It was nice seeing her, but it's also weird because she doesn't know stuff about me anymore. Like she didn't know I'm not scared of the dark now, and she forgot that I don't like green beans. You're allowed to feel weird about it. You're also allowed to want to see her more, even if it's complicated. But everything's complicated, Emma said, sounding much older than 7. But I think that's just how life is. She wasn't wrong about that either. The new year brought changes that none of them expected. Vivian's business started actually making money, enough that she could afford her own place instead of constantly staying at Landon's apartment. She found a small house 10 minutes away, nothing fancy, but with a yard and an extra bedroom and space for Emma's expanding rock collection. I'm not leaving, she assured both of them when she first mentioned looking at places. I just thought maybe having my own space while still being close would be good. Give us room to breathe without feeling like we're on top of each other all the time. I like being on top of each other, Emma said, then immediately giggled at her own accidental innuendo while Landon tried not to laugh. You know what I mean? I'll still be around constantly, but this way when you guys need family time, you have it, and when I need to spread out with work stuff, I can do that without taking over your entire kitchen table. It made sense logically, but Landon felt the familiar fear creeping in. The worry that space meant distance. That distance meant drifting apart, that this was the beginning of Vivian realizing she wanted something different than what they had. You're spiraling, Vivian said one night after Emma had gone to bed. I can see it happening in your head. I'm not spiraling. You're absolutely spiraling. You think me getting my own place means I'm pulling away? Are you? No. I'm creating space for us to grow without suffocating each other. There's a difference. How do I know you're not just setting up an exit strategy? Vivian took his face in her hands, making him look at her directly. Because I'm in love with you, you idiot. I'm in love with your daughter. I'm in love with this messy, complicated life we've built. Getting my own house doesn't change any of that. It just means I'll have somewhere to keep all the business files that are currently taking over your kitchen. You could just buy more filing cabinets. I could. But I've also wanted my own place for a while now, something that's mine that I chose because I liked it, not because it made strategic sense or impressed anyone. And I want it to be close to you guys because you're my family now, even if we haven't made it official yet. Yet? She smiled, soft and a little nervous. Yet. Eventually, whenever we're ready. But I'm not going anywhere, Landon, I promise. She moved into the house in February and Emma insisted on helping decorate, which meant rock specimens on every available surface and drawings, taped to the refrigerator, and a general aesthetic that could best be described as 7-year-old interior designer. Vivian loved every bit of it. They settled into a new rhythm where Vivian had space to work without feeling like she was invading Landon's apartment, but she still showed up for dinner most nights and for all of Emma's school events and for the ordinary moments that made up their life together. Spring came, and with it, Emma's request to join the school science club that met on Tuesday afternoons. The same Tuesday afternoons when Landon was usually working late and couldn't pick her up. I can get her shut, Vivian offered immediately. Are you sure? I know Tuesdays are your busy day. I'll make it work. She wants to do science club. We make it happen. So Vivian became the one picking Emma up from science club, listening to excited explanations about experiments with vinegar and baking soda, helping with the science fair project that involved growing crystals that never quite looked like the pictures in the instruction book. The other parents in the pickup line stopped looking at Vivian like she was an alien and started just nodding hello, accepting her presence as normal. Someone even asked her advice about helping their own kid with a school project, treating her like just another parent instead of a former CEO who'd given up everything for a relationship. I think I've been accepted into the parent club, Vivian told Landon that night. Sarah Miller actually invited me to join the PTA. Are you going to do it? Absolutely not. I have limits, but it was nice to be asked. Emma's relationship with Michelle evolved into something more consistent, though not without complications. Michelle started visiting twice a month,
taking Emma out for afternoon adventures that were sometimes wonderful and sometimes disappointing when Michelle's flakiness showed through. Emma learned to hold her expectations loosely, to be happy when her mother showed up, but not devastated when she didn't. "I think Mom tries," Emma said one evening. "She's just not very good at it." "Some people aren't," Landon agreed, proud of his daughter for seeing the truth without letting it destroy her. "But that's okay because I have you and Vivian, and Grandma, and my friends. I have lots of people who are good at showing up." "You do." "So Mom can just be Mom, and that's enough." The wisdom of a 7-year-old, Landon thought. The ability to accept people as they were without needing them to be something different. Summer arrived with Emma's request to go to science camp, a week-long program that would be her first time away from home without Landon. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, trying to mask his own anxiety about letting her go. "Dad, it's science camp. They do experiments and sleep in cabins and learn about stars. Of course I want to go." "But a whole week?" "We'll be fine. You survived 3 days when I visited Mom. You can survive a week." "When did you get so grown up?" "I've always been this grown up. You just didn't notice because you were too busy worrying about me." She wasn't wrong. Emma went to science camp, and Landon did not handle it well. He cleaned the apartment 3 times, reorganized Emma's rock collection twice, and generally drove Vivian crazy with his nervous energy. "She's fine," Vivian kept saying. "The camp has your number. They'd call if anything was wrong." "But what if nothing? She's having the time of her life learning about geology and making friends and probably not thinking about us at all, which is exactly what's supposed to happen." When Emma came home, she was sunburned and exhausted and full of stories about everything she'd learned. She showed them the rocks she'd collected, the certificates she'd earned, the new friends she'd made who also thought rocks were the coolest thing in the world. "I want to be a geologist when I grow up," she announced. "Or maybe a scientist who studies space rocks. Those are called meteorites, by the way. I learned that. Landon listened to his daughter talk about her future with certainty and excitement, and something shifted in his chest. She was going to be okay. More than okay. She was going to be extraordinary in whatever way she chose, and his job was just to support her along the way. That night, after Emma was asleep, Vivian found him sitting on the couch staring at nothing. "You okay?" she asked. "She's growing up. That's generally what kids do. I know, but it's happening so fast. Soon she'll be 8, then 10, then a teenager who doesn't want to hang out with her boring dad anymore. You're not boring, and even when she's a teenager, she'll still need you, just in different ways. What if I'm not ready for different ways? Then you'll figure it out as you go, the same way you've figured out everything else." Miss Vivian sat down next to him. "You're a good father, Landon. Emma knows that. Nothing about her growing up changes that." "I spent so long just trying to survive after the divorce, making sure she was fed and clothed and had what she needed. And now she's this whole person with interests and dreams and a future I can barely imagine." "When did that happen?" Gradually, and then all at once. That's how these things work." They sat together in the quiet apartment, and Landon thought about the last 2 years, how much had changed, how much had stayed the same, how the most unexpected thing in his life had turned out to be the best thing. "I want to ask you something," he said suddenly. "Okay. Will you marry me?" Vivian went very still. "What?" "Marry me. Be Emma's stepmother officially. Be my wife. Be part of this family not just because we're dating, but because we're choosing each other permanently." "Landon, I don't have a ring. I didn't plan this. I'm asking you while we're sitting on my couch in our pajamas because I just realized I don't want to wait for the right moment. This is the right moment. Every moment with you is the right moment." Vivian's eyes filled with tears, and for a second he thought he'd miscalculated, that this was too much too fast, that he'd ruined everything. Then she kissed him, hard and desperate, and full of everything she couldn't quite say out loud. "Yes," she said when they finally broke apart. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry both of you if Emma will have me. She'll have you. She's been asking when you're going to officially be part of the family for months now. Why didn't you tell me that?" "Because I was waiting for the right moment, and then I realized I was being an idiot." They told Emma the next morning over pancakes, and she looked at them like they were the slowest adults in the world.
Finally, she said, I thought you were never going to figure it out. You're not surprised? Landon asked. Dad, you've been looking at each other like that since forever. Of course you were going to get married. I've been telling my friends for months that Vivian was going to be my stepmom. Were you worried we wouldn't? Vivian asked. A little, but mostly I knew you would because you make each other happy, and that's the whole point. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds, Landon thought, came the kind of wisdom that adults spent years trying to learn. They got married in the fall at the same park where they'd thrown Emma's birthday party, with a small group of friends and family, and Emma as the flower girl, who insisted on carrying a basket of rocks instead of flowers because it was more meaningful. Marcus was Landon's best man, standing up there with a huge grin and making a toast about how he'd known from that first wedding that something was going to happen between them. I didn't actually know, Marcus admitted to Landon before the ceremony, but it makes a better story if I pretend I did. Michelle came to the wedding, sitting in the back and staying quiet. But she came. She hugged Emma and told Landon congratulations with something that looked like genuine happiness mixed with regret for what she'd lost. Vivian's parents would have disapproved of everything about the wedding, the casual setting, the unconventional bride, the fact that Vivian was marrying someone they would have considered beneath her. But they weren't there to disapprove, and Vivian had stopped caring about their ghost opinions a long time ago. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising imperfect love and consistent presence, and the willingness to keep choosing each other even when things got hard. Emma stood between them during the ceremony, holding both their hands. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Emma loudly said, I object to this taking so long. Can we get to the cake part? Which made everyone laugh and broke the nervous tension Landon had been carrying in his chest. At the reception, which was just cake and punch and music playing from someone's phone, Landon watched his new wife dance with his daughter and felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for years. This was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not dramatic, just two people who'd found each other when they both needed finding, building something real out of their broken pieces. You look happy, Marcus said, appearing at Landon's elbow with a piece of cake. I am happy. Good. You deserve it. So does she. Yeah, Marcus agreed, watching Vivian spin Emma around until they both were dizzy and laughing. She really does. A year later, Vivian's business had grown enough that she needed to hire actual employees. Emma was 8 and had decided she wanted to be a paleontologist instead of a geologist because dinosaurs were cooler than regular rocks. Michelle visited once a month with reasonable consistency, and Emma had learned to appreciate her mother's presence without depending on it. Landon still worked at the factory, though he'd been promoted to a supervisory position that came with slightly better pay and slightly less. Judgment from coworkers who'd eventually accepted that his wife being successful didn't make him less of a man. They'd folded Vivian's house into their life, using it as an office and guest room and storage for Emma's ever-expanding rock collection that threatened to take over both residences. Life wasn't perfect. They still fought about money sometimes, about Emma's schedule, about whose turn it was to deal with the broken dishwasher. Vivian still struggled with the impulse to control everything, and Landon still struggled with asking for help when he needed it. Emma still punched kids occasionally when they said mean things, though she was getting better about using her words first. But they were happy. Messily, imperfectly, genuinely happy. On Emma's 8th birthday, Vivian showed up carrying a telescope she'd saved up for, nervous that Emma might have outgrown her space rock phase. Emma opened the box and screamed so loud the neighbors probably called the police. This is the best present ever, she said, already trying to figure out how to set it up. Now I can look at meteorites before they become meteorites, when they're still just space rocks floating around being cosmic. Cosmic, Vivian repeated, grinning at Landon over Emma's head. That's a big word. I know lots of big words now. I'm 8. They set up the telescope in the backyard of Vivian's house, and when the sun finally set, all 3 of them took turns looking at the stars while Emma explained everything she'd learned about constellations and planets and the general magnificence of space. Landon watched his daughter point out Orion's belt to his wife, both of them excited about pinpricks of light millions of miles away, and thought about how far they'd all come. Emma, who'd spent her early years wondering why her mother left, now had more love in her life than she knew what to do with.
Vivian, who'd spent 30 years building walls around herself, had learned to let people in without losing herself. And Landon, who'd thought his story ended with divorce and survival, had discovered that sometimes the best chapters came after you thought the book was finished. "Dad, come look at Jupiter," Emma called. "You can see the moons and everything." He joined them at the telescope, looking at a planet so far away it seemed impossible that they could see it at all. And yet there it was, clear and real and actually kind of beautiful. That was the thing about life, Landon thought. The impossible things kept turning out to be possible. The broken things kept finding ways to heal. The endings kept turning into beginnings if you were brave enough to keep going. He put his arm around Vivian's waist, felt her lean into him automatically, and listened to his daughter talk about the mysteries of the universe with the absolute certainty of someone who believed magic was real because she'd seen it proven over and over again. They stood there in the backyard under the stars, this strange little family that nobody had expected to work. And for the first time in his life, Landon didn't worry about what came next. Whatever it was, they'd face it together, and that was enough. That was everything.